Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to dive deep into one of the most critical developments in the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine, a topic that's not just about military strategies or political maneuvers, but something even more fundamental: money. It's a fascinating look into how economics, international finance, and geopolitics intertwine in warfare. And as always, I'll try to keep things easy to digest. Stick around, because this issue is shaping the very future of Eastern Europe and might even change the way conflicts are fought in the future. So let's start with the big news. On June 13th, the G7 leaders agreed to unlock a staggering $50 billion in new aid for Ukraine. That's on top of the $61 billion that the US Congress had already approved earlier this year. But here's the twist. This isn't just another grant. Instead, it's a loan. Yep, a loan. And the genius behind this financial move is that it uses frozen Russian assets as collateral. More specifically, we're talking about the interest accrued on roughly $300 billion in Russian funds that have been frozen in Western financial institutions since 2022. Now, to fully understand why this is such a clever move, we need to rewind a bit. When Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, the Kremlin likely didn't expect the invasion to drag on this long, or that their own financial assets would become part of the battleground. But that's exactly what happened. Russia's so-called Fortress Russia strategy involved parking about $300 billion in Western financial institutions, likely thinking that it would protect those funds from sanctions or political fallout. They were wrong. The West froze those assets, and now the money has just been sitting there, growing interest. For 2 years, we didn't really know what was going to happen with that money. Would it just sit there indefinitely? Could it be seized outright? Would it be part of peace negotiations? Well, now we have part of the answer. The West plans to use that accrued interest to secure a loan for Ukraine, allowing Kiev to keep fighting without increasing Russia's leverage in the process. So why make it a loan and not a simple grant? Well, there are a couple of reasons. First, loans are easier to sell politically. For example, Republicans in the US Congress are generally more supportive of loans because they come with the expectation of repayment. This makes them more palatable to fiscal conservatives who might be skeptical of endlessly pouring taxpayer dollars into foreign wars. Additionally, a loan helps avoid the political fallout that could come with seizing Russian assets outright. Seizing assets would set a dangerous precedent. Imagine how that would look to countries like China or Saudi Arabia, which have significant financial interests in Western banks. They'd start pulling out their money, and that would create a global financial crisis. By only using the interest accrued on Russian assets, the G7 is being smart, balancing the need to support Ukraine with maintaining global financial stability. Now let's talk about what this means for Russia. By freezing and using the interest on Russia's assets, the West has essentially stripped Moscow of some of its bargaining power. Russia likely assumed that those assets would be part of a future peace deal, where they could be unfrozen as part of a negotiation to end the war. By taking the interest and using it for Ukraine, the West is signaling that these assets are no longer part of the equation. But there's a bit of a catch here. The more that's taken from these assets, the less leverage the West has in future negotiations. For example, if Russia knows that its money's gone forever, it might calculate that it has less to lose by continuing the war. That's where the complexity of the strategy comes in. If the West wants to maintain some leverage over Russia, it can't seize everything outright. From Ukraine's perspective, this is a huge win. The $50 billion will provide critical military aid, allowing Kiev to continue its fight, which could extend into 2025 and beyond. While loans do require repayment, this one is structured in such a way that Ukraine is not on the hook for the interest payments. Instead, the interest on the Russian assets will cover that, so Ukraine can focus its resources on defending itself without having to worry about crippling debt in the short term. But as with any plan, there are risks. One concern is that Kiev might see an incentive to intentionally default on the loan. Why? Because if Ukraine defaults, the G7 would still seize the interest on Russian assets. meaning that Ukraine could effectively get the $50 billion and not have to repay it. This could potentially create a perverse incentive for Ukraine to take advantage of the situation. Another concern is the broader economic impact. The West has to tread carefully here. If Russia starts to believe that all of its assets will be seized permanently, it could react aggressively, either militarily or economically. The other issue is precedent. What message does this send to the global financial system? Would other countries with authoritarian leanings start pulling their assets from Western banks out of fear that they could be next? So, what happens next? This is a developing story, and as with all things geopolitical, we're bound to see more twists and turns. Will Russia escalate in response? Will other countries start pulling their assets from Western banks? Or will this be the financial lifeline that helps Ukraine turn the tide of the war? Only time will tell. What's clear, though, is that this $50 billion loan backed by frozen Russian assets is a bold move by the G7. It might not end the war tomorrow, but it significantly shifts the financial landscape and alters the balance of power on the battlefield. That's all for today, folks. This is a complex issue, but it's one that will have lasting impacts on how wars are financed and fought in the modern world. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more videos like this one. And as always, drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think about this new financial strategy in Ukraine. Until next time, stay informed and take care.